My name is Clara, I'm 27, and my world fell apart when my fiancé demanded a break so he could be with my own sister. Before I tell you how I sold our dream home out from under them and vanished without a trace, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember the smell of the lemon cleaner I'd used on the coffee table that morning, and the way the afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, casting long stripes across the hardwood floor. Everything was normal, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Mark was sitting on the gray linen couch, the one we'd spent 3 weekends picking out together. He was staring at his hands, turning his phone over and over. I sat down next to him, leaving a small, polite space between us. "Hey," I said softly. "You've been quiet all day. Is everything okay?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes, they were the eyes of a stranger. The warmth was gone. The easy affection we'd shared for 4 years had just evaporated. "Clara, we need to talk." The air left my lungs. It was like the world suddenly went silent, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. Every woman knows what those words mean. They're the beginning of the end. He wouldn't hold my gaze. He looked at the wall, at the floor, anywhere but at me. "It's about Sarah," he said, his voice flat. "My sister. My younger sister, who was supposed to be my maid of honor." "What about her?" I asked, my own voice sounding thin and distant. He took a deep breath, the kind a man takes before he delivers a fatal blow. She's having a really hard time since her breakup. She needs support. She needs family." He paused, then finally dropped the bomb. "She needs me right now. And I think we need to take a break." A break. The word hung in the air, ugly and obscene. A break for my sister? The logic was so twisted, so insane, that I couldn't even form a response. I just stared at him, my mind scrambling to make sense of the nonsense he was spewing. He was breaking our engagement, ending our life together, because my sister needed a shoulder to cry on? It was then I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was about so much more than a shoulder to cry on. Just 6 months ago, that silence had been filled with laughter. We were planning our future in this very room. We'd finalized the venue for our dream wedding, a beautiful little vineyard in Napa Valley. Our save-the-dates were already designed. We were living in the beautiful San Diego house I'd received as an inheritance from my grandmother, a place filled with light and happy memories, a place Mark always called our forever home. We had a life. A real, solid, tangible life. Or so I thought. The change had been subtle at first. A slow poisoning I'd willfully ignored. It started with the wedding plans. Mark, who had been so excited about choosing the menu and the band, suddenly became distant. Every question I asked was met with a sigh and a wave of his hand. "Babe, I don't have the headspace for this right now," he'd say. "Sarah's really going through it. I was on the phone with her for hours last night. Sarah. It was always Sarah. After her boyfriend of 6 months had dumped her, she had latched onto Mark. At first, I thought it was sweet. He was being a good future brother-in-law. She'd call him for advice. She'd come over for dinner, her eyes red from crying, and he'd sit with her on the patio while I cooked, their heads bent close together in hushed conversation. Then she started leaving things at our house. A sweater. A book. Her favorite coffee mug. It was like she was slowly marking her territory, weaving herself into the fabric of our home. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was being a bad sister. How could I be jealous when she was in so much pain? My mother even called me once, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Clara, you need to be more understanding. Sarah looks up to Mark like a big brother. You're lucky to have a fiancé who cares so much about family." I let her words shame me into silence. I pushed my doubts down, burying them under a mountain of guilt. I smiled when Sarah would text Mark late at night. I pretended not to notice when he'd step outside to take her calls. I was being supportive. I was being a good sister. A good fiancé. Until that night, about a week before he dropped the bomb. I woke up around 2 a.m., my throat dry. As I walked down the hallway to the kitchen, I heard it. A low murmur from the back patio. The sliding door was open just a crack, letting in the cool night air. It was Mark's voice, hushed but clear. "Don't worry," he was saying, his tone soft and intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. "I'll handle Clara soon. We just need to be smart about this." My blood ran cold. The glass I was about to grab for water slipped from my hand, but I caught it just before it hit the floor, my knuckles white. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a deafening drum in the suffocating quiet of the house. I stood there, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, and I knew I had to confront him. I had to know. But my feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. What would I even say? "Excuse me, were you just plotting my emotional execution with my little sister?" Cowardice took over. I crept back to bed, my side of the mattress feeling vast and cold, and I lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, listening to the sound of his breathing when he finally came back inside. It was the deepest betrayal I could imagine, and I hadn't even confronted him yet. I just let the poison of his words seep into my veins. The next week was a special kind of hell. It was a performance. I was an actress in the final, tragic scenes of a play I didn't know I was in. I smiled. I made coffee. I asked about his day. And all the while, I watched. I watched the way his phone was never, ever face up on the counter anymore. I watched how he'd flinch almost imperceptibly when I walked into a room while he was texting. I saw the shared, knowing glances he and Sarah would exchange over the dinner table, glances they thought I was too naive, too trusting, too stupid to notice. They treated me like a ghost in my own home, a piece of furniture they had to navigate around until the movers came. They thought I was oblivious. They underestimated me. They always had. The confrontation, when it finally happened, wasn't a fiery explosion. It was a cold, calculated execution. It was that Tuesday afternoon, the one I told you about. The day my life split into a before and after. He sat me down on that gray couch, the one we were still paying off, and he delivered his lines. He had rehearsed this. I could tell. Every word was chosen to inflict maximum pain while giving him maximum plausible deniability. "Clara," he began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "you know how much I love you." A lie. "And you know I see Sarah as the little sister I never had." A bigger lie. He went on, spinning a web of gaslighting and manipulation that was both breathtaking and nauseating. He painted a picture of my sister as a fragile, broken bird, and himself as her noble savior. He told me she was having panic attacks, that she wasn't eating, that she needed him. He said our relationship was strong enough to withstand this. He called it a test. He actually used that word. A test of our love, a test of my compassion, a test of my commitment to family. "If you really love me," he said, his eyes pleading, yet somehow cold and dead, "you'll understand. You'll give me this space to help her. A real partner would want me to do the right thing." He was twisting it, turning his infidelity, his betrayal, into a noble sacrifice. And worse, he was making me the villain if I didn't go along with it. If I objected, I wasn't a loving fiancé, I was a cruel, selfish sister who was jealous of her siblings' pain. It was a masterpiece of cruelty. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, icy calm had settled over me. I had already heard the truth on the patio in the dead of night. This was just the official story, the one they had concocted to keep me quiet, to keep me waiting in the wings like a fool while they started their life together. So I just nodded. I let the silence stretch, watching the panic flicker in his eyes. He expected a fight. He wanted one. A fight would have validated him, made him feel like he was being torn between two women who loved him. I refused to give him the satisfaction. "Okay, Mark," I said, my voice eerily steady. He blinked, thrown off script. "Okay? Just, okay?" "Yes," I said. "If you need a break to go and support my sister, then you should do that." Relief washed over his face, so pure and undisguised it felt like a second slap. He actually smiled. "Thank you, Clara. I knew you'd understand. This is just for a little while. I'll be back before you know it. I'll just pack a bag and stay at a friend's for a bit, give Sarah some space to come over and talk." He stood up, kissed the top of my head, a gesture so condescending it made my skin crawl, and walked into our bedroom. I sat there, listening to the sounds of him packing away his life with me. The zip of a suitcase. The clatter of toiletries. 10 minutes later, he walked out, bag in hand. "I love you," he said from the doorway. I just looked at him. I didn't say it back. The door closed behind him, and the click of the lock echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of the house. I was alone. And in that moment, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was a woman with a plan. For about an hour, I didn't move. I just sat on that couch, the indentation in the cushion next to me slowly rising, erasing the last physical trace of him. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down on me. The tears I had refused to shed in front of him finally came, hot and furious. It wasn't just grief for the man I thought I loved, it was a deep, guttural rage at the sheer audacity of the betrayal. From my fiancé. From my own sister. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone. There was only one person I could call. My fingers fumbled as I scrolled to her name, Olivia. My best friend since kindergarten, the one person who had seen me through every scraped knee, every high school drama, every triumph, and every failure. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, you. I was just thinking about you. Did you guys finally decide on the caterer?" Her cheerful voice shattered my composure. A sob ripped through me, raw and ugly. "Clara? What is it? What's wrong?" Her voice instantly sharpened with concern. I tried to speak, but the words were stuck behind a wall of tears. He left, Liv," I finally choked out. "Left? What do you mean, left? Like, to the store?" "No," I whispered. "He's gone. He wants a break." I could hear her take a sharp breath. "A break? A break from what? The wedding is in 5 months. What on earth is he talking about?" And then I told her. I told her everything. The late-night phone calls. The constant presence of my sister. The hushed conversation on the patio. And finally, the cold, rehearsed speech about how he needed to leave me to go support Sarah. I laid it all out, every humiliating detail, the words tumbling out of me in a torrent of pain and anger. For a long moment after I finished, there was only silence on the other end of the line. I could picture her, probably pacing her apartment, her face a mask of disbelief. Then she spoke, and her voice was dangerously quiet. "He did what? With your sister?" "Oh, absolutely not, Clara." The quiet was gone, replaced by the righteous fury of a true friend. "No, no, no. He does not get to do this. He does not get to put you on a shelf like a doll he'll play with later, especially not for your sister. That is the most disgusting, cowardly thing I have ever heard." Hearing her say it, hearing the validation in her voice, was like a splash of ice water on my face. She wasn't telling me to calm down. She wasn't telling me to see his side. She was reflecting my own rage back at me, tenfold. "He thinks I'm going to wait for him," I said, my voice gaining strength. "He actually thinks I'm just going to sit here in this house, watering the plants and waiting for him to decide if I'm still the one he wants." "And are you?" Olivia asked, her voice soft but firm. A fire ignited in my chest, a fire I thought had been extinguished. No, I said, the word tasting like freedom. No, I am not. I stood up and started pacing the living room, the phone pressed hard against my ear. He thinks this is our house. He talks about the renovations he did, the deck he built. He forgets whose name is on the deed. He forgets that this was my grandmother's house, Olivia. My inheritance. It's my house. Damn right, it is, she said. So what are you going to do about it? And just like that, the path forward became crystal clear. The fog of grief and confusion lifted, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't a victim in this story. I was the one holding all the cards. I stopped pacing and stood in the middle of the living room, looking at the life he had so casually decided to put on pause. I'm going to sell it, I said. The words came out before I had even fully formed the thought, but they felt right. They felt powerful. You're what? I'm selling the house, Liv. And I'm getting out of here. He wants a break? I'll give him a break. A permanent one. I walked over to my laptop, my movements now filled with a purpose I hadn't felt in months. I Googled top real estate agents in San Diego. The first name that came up was a woman with a confident smile and a string of 5-star reviews. I didn't hesitate. I dialed the number. A professional, friendly voice answered. Linda Hayes speaking. Hello, Ms. Hayes, I said, my voice steady and professional, a complete stranger to the crying woman I had been just 10 minutes ago. My name is Clara Miller. I need to sell my house. And I need to do it as quickly as possible. And as I put the phone down, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The path ahead was terrifying, but for the first time in weeks, it was mine to choose. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is an incredible encouragement for me. Please, comment with the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. The next 2 days were a blur of methodical, silent action. Linda, the realtor, was a force of nature. She came over the very next morning, her eyes sharp and her demeanor all business. She walked through my house, the house of my grandmother, taking notes and pointing out its best features. She didn't ask a single personal question. She didn't ask why the photos on the mantelpiece were suddenly all face down. She just saw the value in the property and laid out a clear, aggressive plan to sell it. The market is hot, Clara, she said, her voice confident. We'll have this in escrow before you can blink. We decided to put a for sale sign up, but only in the backyard, hidden from the street. For now. That afternoon, I started packing. Not my things. His. I went through the house like a surgeon, excising every trace of Mark. His clothes from the closet, his toothbrush from the holder, his half-read book from the nightstand. I packed it all into boxes with a cold, detached efficiency. There were no tears. Each item I packed felt like reclaiming a piece of my own soul. This wasn't our home anymore. It was mine. The call came on Thursday afternoon. It was my mother. Clara, honey, she said, her voice a little too bright. Sarah and I were thinking of stopping by. And Mark is going to meet us there. He feels just awful about this whole situation, and we all think it's time to talk this out like a family. My stomach turned to ice. It wasn't a request, it was an announcement. An ambush. They were coming to my house, to my sanctuary, to gang up on me. To pressure me, to guilt me, to break me down until I agreed to be the quiet, forgiving doormat they needed me to be. Mom, now isn't a good time, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Nonsense, she chirped. We'll be there in 20 minutes. We'll bring coffee. And she hung up. I stood in my living room, surrounded by neatly taped boxes, and a wave of pure panic washed over me. Then, just as quickly, it was replaced by a cold fury. They wanted to come into my house and lecture me? Fine. Let them. I moved the boxes into the spare bedroom and shut the door. I made myself a cup of tea, my hands shaking slightly. I sat on the couch and waited. They arrived exactly 20 minutes later, a united front of betrayal. My mother, Mary, bustled in first, a box of donuts in her hand and a look of strained sympathy on her face. Sarah trailed behind her, her eyes downcast, the very picture of a remorseful little sister. And then came Mark, looking tired and sad, a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother said, rushing over to hug me. I stood stiffly in her embrace. "We are all so worried about you." They sat on the couch opposite me, a panel of judges ready to deliver their verdict on my pain. "Clara," my mother started, taking on her role as chief negotiator. "We need to be reasonable. Mark has explained everything. He was just trying to be there for your sister. Family helps family. This whole break thing has just been a misunderstanding." I looked at Sarah. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at her hands, twisting a silver ring around her finger. The ring Mark had given her for her birthday last year. "Clara, you're being so dramatic," my mother continued, her voice losing its sympathetic edge. "Your sister is fragile right now, and Mark is just being a good man. You should be proud of him, not pushing him away." It was a punch to the gut. A complete and total invalidation of my feelings, of my reality. My own mother was siding with them. She was calling me dramatic for being devastated by the destruction of my future. Mark finally spoke, his voice low and sorrowful. "Clara, baby, I miss you. I miss our home. This has been harder than I ever imagined. I just want to come home. We can work through this. I know we can." He looked around the room, a wistful smile on his face. "We put so much work into this place. Remember building that deck? We can have a barbecue this weekend. Just like old times." The dramatic irony was so thick I could have choked on it. He was talking about barbecues on the deck, completely oblivious to the fact that a 4-foot sign announcing the sale of his forever home was hammered into the lawn just a few feet away. I looked at the three of them. My mother, my sister, the man I was supposed to marry. A family. Just not my family. I gave them the performance of a lifetime. I let a few tears slip. I nodded meekly. I told them I was confused. I told them I needed more time to think. I played the part of the heartbroken, fragile woman they expected me to be. It worked. They visibly relaxed. My mother patted my hand, telling me I was doing the right thing. Sarah finally looked up and gave me a small, watery smile of gratitude. Mark looked relieved, confident that his plan was working, that his backup option was secure. They left soon after, convinced they had successfully managed the situation. "We'll talk soon, baby," Mark said at the door, trying to kiss me. I turned my head so his lips met my cheek. The moment their car pulled away from the curb, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The mask fell away. I walked to the spare room and threw open the door, looking at the boxes filled with his life. Tomorrow, they would be gone. The next day, the for sale sign would move to the front yard. I had given them their show. But the final act was all mine. That night, I booked a moving company online. Destination, a storage unit near the apartment building I'd heard Sarah mention she and Mark were looking at downtown. I typed out a short, simple note to be taped to the lead box. "Here's the rest of your stuff. Good luck with your new life." No anger. No sadness. Just a simple, clean cut. He wanted a break. I was giving him a clean break. The week that followed was a whirlwind. The moving company came and cleared out every last trace of Mark. The for sale sign went up in the front yard, bold and unapologetic. Linda hosted an open house that weekend, and by Monday, we had 3 offers, all over the asking price. It was surreal. The life I had been building for 4 years was being dismantled and sold off in a matter of days. And I had never felt more in control. While the divorce from my old life, because that's what it felt like, was being finalized through real estate contracts, I was planning my escape. I had been passively looking at a promotion opportunity within my tech company, a senior project manager role at our Austin, Texas campus. It was a long shot, something I'd told myself I would apply for someday. Someday had arrived. I polished my resume, wrote a killer cover letter, and hit send. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was the head of the Austin division. They'd been following my work, they loved my portfolio, and could I fly out for an interview next week? I booked the flight without a second thought. I packed a single carry-on bag, and as the plane took off from San Diego, leaving my old life behind, I didn't feel sad. I felt a thrilling, terrifying sense of freedom. The interview in Austin was a blur of confidence I didn't know I possessed. I nailed every question. I walked out of that office knowing I had gotten the job. That night, sitting in my hotel room, I accepted the official offer. My salary would be 30% higher. I was starting over, and I was starting on my own terms. The house officially closed the week after. The money from the sale, my money, from my inheritance, was wired into my bank account. I packed up my own belongings, sold the furniture I didn't want, and shipped the rest to a new apartment I'd leased online in a trendy neighborhood in Austin. It was only then, once all the logistical dust had settled, that I let the world know. I logged onto Facebook, my hands steady. I could have unleashed a firestorm. I could have exposed them, posted screenshots, told the world what my fiancé and my sister had done. But that would have been their drama, not my victory. Instead, I chose a single, smiling photo of myself from my trip to Austin, standing in front of a colorful mural. And I wrote a simple, clean caption. Excited to announce I'm starting a new chapter. I've accepted a promotion as a senior project manager and am thrilled to be calling Austin, Texas my new home. Sometimes when one door closes, a much bigger, better one opens. Here's to new beginnings. I hit post and turned off my phone. When I turned it back on a few hours later, it was a firestorm, but not the one I had expected. It was an explosion of support. Dozens of comments. Hundreds of likes. Friends congratulating me. Former colleagues wishing me well. And tucked in between them, the confused questions from family, friends, and extended relatives. Wow, congrats! Is Mark moving with you? This is sudden. What about the wedding? My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin. Clara, what is going on? Your mom just posted pictures of Sarah and Mark at the beach, and you're moving to Texas? I didn't have to say a word. The truth was revealing itself. My simple, positive announcement, when placed next to their blatant disrespect, painted a very clear picture. I was moving on. They were rubbing their relationship in everyone's faces. People could draw their own conclusions. The most important call came that evening. It was my dad. My parents had gone through a bitter divorce years ago, and my dad had always been the quieter, more observant one. I saw your post, sweetie, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed. Your aunt called me. She told me what your mother has been saying. And she told me what Mark and Sarah have been doing. He paused. I'm so sorry, Clara. I'm so sorry they did this to you. Tears pricked my eyes. It's okay, Dad. I'm okay. No, it's not okay, he said, and I heard a hard edge enter his voice, an anger that mirrored my own. Mark's a small-time contractor. You know, a good chunk of his best clients came from my referrals, right? From my architect buddies who trusted my word. I know, I whispered. Well, he said, his voice grim and final. I made a few phone calls this afternoon. I told them I could no longer, in good conscience, recommend Mark for any projects. I told them my recommendation was officially withdrawn. No man who does that to my daughter will ever get another referral from me. It's done. I was speechless. It was a move so decisive, so final. It wasn't just emotional support, it was tangible justice. He had taken away the one thing Mark valued most, the appearance of success and respectability. My new life had begun. And the demolition of his had just started. Life in Austin was a breath of fresh air. I threw myself into my new job. My new team was incredible, smart, driven, and blissfully unaware of the drama I had left behind. I was just Clara, the new senior project manager. I wasn't the jilted fiancé or the betrayed sister. I was a blank slate. I found a yoga studio, discovered the best breakfast tacos in the city, and slowly started to feel like myself again. I hadn't heard a word from Mark, Sarah, or my mother since I left. I had blocked their numbers, but I knew if they really wanted to, they could find a way. For about a month, there was only silence. I learned through the grapevine, my cousin, mostly, that things were not going well back in San Diego. My dad's phone calls had been devastatingly effective. Mark had lost 2 major contracts overnight. Word travels fast in that world. People were talking. My simple, drama-free departure had made them look even worse. I was at my desk one Wednesday afternoon, deep in a budget spreadsheet, when my office phone rang. It was the receptionist downstairs. Clara? There's a Mark Miller here to see you. He says it's personal. Should I send him up? My blood turned to ice. Mark. Here. In Austin. In my office building. How did he even find me? The audacity was staggering. For a moment, I considered telling the receptionist to call security. But then, a different feeling took over. Curiosity. I wanted to see him. I wanted to see what a man who had lost everything looked like. It's all right, Judy, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Send him up. I stood up and walked to the glass wall of my office, looking out over the open-plan workspace. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and he walked out. He looked terrible. He was thinner, his clothes were rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. This was not the confident, charming man I had almost married. This was a ghost. He saw me and walked towards my office. I didn't move. I just stood there, my arms crossed, and waited. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, closing it softly behind him. Clara, he breathed, his voice hoarse. Mark, I said. My voice was level. No anger, no tears. Just a flat, even tone. What are you doing here? I had to see you, he stammered, his eyes darting around my office, taking in the view, the new furniture, the symbols of my success. Your office is nice. I didn't ask you for a design consultation, I said coldly. I asked you what you are doing here. He flinched. He took a step closer, his hands outstretched as if to plead. I made a mistake, Clara. A horrible, terrible mistake. I just stared at him, my expression unreadable. He pressed on, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. It wasn't what you think. Sarah, she was so vulnerable, so lost. She came onto me, Clara. She manipulated the situation. I was weak, I was confused, I was just trying to help her, but I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. Leaving you was the biggest regret of my life. It was a pathetic, blame-shifting performance. He was trying to cast my sister as the villain, himself as the hapless victim, and me as his righteous savior. He expected me to be flattered. He expected me to feel sorry for him. He expected me to be the same forgiving, understanding woman he had left on that couch a month ago. He was in for a rude awakening. I let him finish, the silence in the room stretching until it was uncomfortable. Then, I spoke. "Are you done?" I asked. He blinked. "What? Are you done with your speech?" I clarified. "Because it was a good one. You hit all the key points. It was my sister's fault. You were weak. You never stopped loving me. It was very compelling. But you left one part out." He looked confused. "What part?" I took a step forward, closing the distance between us until I could see the desperation in his eyes. "The part where you thought I was a fool. The part where you thought I was your backup plan. Your safety net. The part where you thought you could put my life on hold, go sleep with my sister, and then come crawling back when it didn't work out." His face paled. "No, it wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I said, my voice dangerously quiet but cutting like a knife. "This was never about her, Mark. This was about you. Your arrogance. Your disrespect. You thought I was your property. You thought I would just wait. You were wrong." I walked back to my desk and picked up my phone. "Now please leave my office before I have security escort you out." He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The ghost of the man I loved, finally realizing he was dealing with a completely different woman. He saw there was nothing left for him here. No forgiveness. No second chances. Nothing. Without another word, he turned and walked out of my office, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him go, watched him get in the elevator and disappear. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a simple, quiet feeling of being, finally and completely, free. In the months that followed my confrontation with Mark, my life in Austin blossomed. I was excelling at my job, earning the respect of my colleagues and the trust of my superiors. I made friends, real friends, who knew me for who I was now, not who I had been. I even started dating casually, rediscovering what it felt like to be with someone who looked at me with genuine admiration, not calculating self-interest. News from San Diego came in sporadic, second-hand bursts, mostly from my dad or my cousin. It painted a grim picture. Mark's business was in a death spiral. Without my father's referrals, his pipeline of high-end projects had dried up. He was apparently taking small, low-profit jobs just to stay afloat. My mother, I was told, was furious, not at Mark or Sarah, but at me and my father for ruining a good man's life. Sarah, it seemed, was not enjoying her prize. The fantasy of being with the successful, charming older man had crumbled along with his bank account. They were living in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment downtown, the one they had planned to get after I was out of the picture. My cousin mentioned seeing Sarah at the grocery store. She looked stressed and unhappy, a far cry from the glowing woman she had been pretending to be. Their great love story, built on a foundation of lies, was cracking under the pressure of reality. I felt a distant, clinical sense of satisfaction, but it wasn't the focus of my life. Their downfall was a background noise to the symphony of my own success. I was moving forward, and they were a memory, a lesson learned. I thought I knew the whole story. I thought the worst of the revelations were behind me. I was wrong. The call came on a Saturday morning. It was Olivia. Her voice was strange, tight with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "Clara," she said, "are you sitting down?" "I am now," I said, sinking onto my sofa. "What's going on, Liv? You sound weird." "I found something," she said. "Something you need to see." My mom was getting rid of her old iPad, the one the whole family used to share when we were over at her house. She asked me to wipe it for her before she donated it. I was going through the old email accounts to log them out, and I saw Sarah's. My heart started to beat a little faster. Okay. Her account was still logged in. And it was synced. Clara, it had everything. Emails going back over a year. I was silent, waiting. I wasn't snooping, I swear, Olivia said, her voice rushing. I was just about to log out when I saw a subject line that made me stop. It was from Mark. From 10 months ago. The subject was our plan. A cold dread washed over me. Liv, what did it say? Clara, it's worse than we thought. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a recent affair. This was a long con. They had been sleeping together for almost a year. They had a whole plan. I could hear her shuffling papers. She had printed them out. I'm going to read you one. This is from Sarah to Mark. From last December. I held my breath. Olivia's voice was flat, devoid of emotion as she read my sister's words. Mark, you have to be patient. I know it's hard, but we can't blow this up now. Clara's grandmother is sick. If something happens, Clara will get the house. We need that house. Just hold on until after the wedding. Once your name is on the deed as her husband, it's marital property. Then you can leave her. We'll have the house, the security. Just a few more months of pretending. I can handle it. Can you? I closed my eyes. The words hit me like physical blows. It wasn't just cheating. It was a calculated, predatory plot. They weren't just betraying me, they were targeting my grandmother's inheritance. They were waiting for her to die. They saw my grief, my family tragedy, as a financial opportunity. They wanted to get his name on the deed of my house, the sacred place my grandmother had left for me, and then toss me aside. The divorce they planned would have been financially devastating. Olivia kept reading, her voice shaking with rage now. There were emails from Mark, reassuring Sarah, talking about their future, about how they would redecorate my grandmother's house after I was gone. They had talked about the college fund my parents had set up for me, wondering if they could get access to it. They had picked out furniture. They had planned a life in the wreckage of mine. There's more, Olivia whispered. They talked about you constantly. About how trusting you were. How easy you were to fool. I finally found my voice. Send them to me, I said. Send me everything. A few minutes later, the email arrived. I opened the PDF. Page after page of their words, their plans, their deceit. I scrolled through, my finger tracing their casual cruelty on the screen. It was all there, in black and white. A premeditated emotional and financial ambush. My sister and my fiancé, plotting together in the dark. I didn't cry. I had no tears left for them. I just felt a profound, chilling sense of clarity. This wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a crime scene. And I had just been handed the forensic evidence. For a week, I did nothing with the emails. I didn't forward them to my father. I didn't post them online. I didn't send them to Mark or Sarah with a triumphant I know. They were my private, ugly truth. They were the final confirmation that I hadn't just dodged a bullet, I had escaped a meticulously planned ambush. Knowing the full, calculated depth of their betrayal didn't reopen the wound. It cauterized it. It burned away any lingering wisps of doubt or misplaced nostalgia. It was a clean, sterile burn. My life went on. I led my team through a challenging product launch, earning a bonus and more praise from the leadership team. I went on a weekend trip to the hill country with a new group of friends. I adopted a rescue dog from a local shelter, a scruffy terrier mix I named Gus, whose unconditional affection was a balm to my soul. I was building a life so full and bright that the shadows of my past were getting smaller and smaller. Then, about a month after Olivia's discovery, an email landed in my inbox. It was from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my stomach clench. "We need to talk." It was from Sarah. I almost deleted it without reading. What could she possibly have to say that mattered? But a morbid curiosity, the same feeling that had made me tell the receptionist to send Mark up to my office, made me click it open. The email was long, rambling, and dripping with self-pity. It was a masterpiece of narcissistic delusion. She told me Mark had left her. His business had completely failed, he was in debt, and he had blamed her for everything. He had called her a mistake and moved back in with his parents in another state. She was being evicted from their apartment. She had no money. She couldn't find a job. And then came the punchline. "I know things were complicated between us," she wrote, "but you're my sister. Your family. You've always been the successful one, the lucky one. You got the inheritance from grandma, you got the big promotion and the high salary. It's not fair that I'm left with nothing. Your new life was built on the ashes of mine, and you owe me. I've spoken to a lawyer, and he said family has obligations. I need you to help me. I need $5,000 to get a new apartment and get back on my feet. It's the least you can do after what your father did to Mark, which basically ruined my life too." I read it twice. Then a third time. I actually laughed out loud. It was so breathtakingly audacious, so completely devoid of self-awareness, that it was almost performance art. There was no apology. No remorse. No acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. Just a demand. She had tried to steal my home, my future, and my sanity, and now that her plan had failed, she felt entitled to my money. She was blaming me for the consequences of her own actions. For a moment, I considered sending her the PDF of her own emails back. A simple, brutal checkmate. But what was the point? It wouldn't give her a conscience. It would only give her the dramatic satisfaction of being caught. She didn't deserve even that. Instead, I took a deep breath and began to type. My reply was short. It was the last thing I would ever say to her. "Sarah," I wrote. "You are right about one thing. I am successful. I built a new life for myself not on the ashes of yours, but from the ashes of the one you and Mark tried to burn to the ground. You are not entitled to my home, my happiness, or my money. My father didn't ruin Mark's life, Mark ruined it himself, with your help. The life you have now is not my fault. It is the direct result of the choices you made. I am not sending you any money. I am not your safety net. My final gift to you is this piece of free advice. True success, the kind that lasts, is built on integrity, not on deception. I hope one day you figure that out. Consider the life you have now the price of the choices you made. I wish you the best, but I will not be a part of it." I signed it simply, Clara. I hit send. Then I created a filter to send any future emails from her or any similar addresses directly to the trash, unread. I blocked her on every platform. I severed the final, toxic tie. It's been 2 years since that day. My life is good. It's more than good, it's mine. Gus is snoring at my feet as I write this. My career is thriving. I'm in a loving, healthy relationship with a man who respects me, a man who finds my independence to be my most attractive quality. I speak to my dad every week. I have not spoken to my mother or my sister since that awful day in my old living room. Sometimes, the only way to heal a wound is to amputate the infected limb. The worst thing that ever happened to me was not losing a fiancé or a sister. The worst thing was realizing I had built my life around people who saw my love as a resource to be exploited. And the best thing that ever happened to me was being given the brutal, painful, liberating opportunity to burn it all down and build something new, something stronger, something real, on my own foundation. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but it was important. For anyone out there who has ever been made to feel small, or like a backup plan, or that your love is something to be taken for granted, please know this: you are the architect of your own life. Don't ever let anyone else hold the blueprints. I'm curious, have any of you ever had to make a clean break to save yourselves? Let me know in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. You are not alone.